Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Urbick. I am going to share with you my presentation on myself for our Engineering 1A course that I shared in spring of 2025. Just a little bit about who I am and what I do. So, just real quick, this image here was taken at one of our facilities. I work for Granite Construction in the off time, and it was at one of our mining pits. We are removing the overburdened topsoil so that we can get down to the rock to make crushed rock, to make aggregate base and roadway surfacing. This excavator was quite large, and we were moving about 11,000 cubic yards a day. So that was quite substantial and quite an experience being out there. We had 25 of these trucks. The truck bed, there were two of them hitched together, so we had to only use them off-road, but we were moving a tremendous amount of dirt. It was really exciting. I was born at Dominican Hospital, raised in Soquel, and then by the time I didn't have to walk up and down all those hills, my mom and our family moved to Capitola, right in the nice flat jewel box. So thanks. But I did learn to drive a stick shift up and down those hills, so I feel that was quite an accomplishment. All right, I went to Soquel High School. Um, and actually, it was at Soquel that I decided to major in engineering. I have two uncles, one civil, one electrical, and I really liked the lifestyle they had. They were pretty happy, pretty comfortable, and I thought, you know what? I could go for that. I could do that. Uh, Long story, but I worked at a daycare while I was at high school. There I met a family who took their children, both their children, to that same daycare. The father was a civil engineer, a geotechnical engineer. He saw me with a pre-calculus honors math book and asked what my interests were. When I told him engineering, he offered me a job after high school. So I went to work for his firm in Watsonville, and that's where it all began for me. I started with Stephen Rass and Associates. Their motto was "Dirt is our life." So I've always been playing in the dirt, as you can tell from the first slide to this slide. Uh, the times that I was there was right after the Loma Prieta earthquake in 1989. So Steve and his company were instrumental in repairing and evaluating the damage that had happened to downtown Santa Cruz. You can ask parents, grandparents about it, but anybody who was here remembers. I can't say the day that the earth stood still because it was the day the earth moved a heck of a lot for Central California. So that was a really good experience. While I was there, I learned a lot of office skills. I learned a lot of interpersonal skills, and learned a lot about engineering and design, slope stabilities, and materials testing. So that was a really good experience for me. During the time that I was working with Stephen Rass and Associates, I was also going to Cabrillo, working towards my eventual transfer to another university. So as you can see from the slide, I took drafting twice. I was a repeat offender. Um, this was pre-AutoCAD, or AutoCAD was very new. So a lot of it was done by hand, and I had a really hard time with that, apparently. I did take surveying while I was here at Cabrillo. I took materials courses, I took calculus physics, all the other classes necessary to get me to transfer. Once I was ready to transfer, oops, excuse me, I transferred to University of the Pacific. It's a private school in Stockton, California, so don't hold that against it. It's a really nice campus. Just don't leave the campus. It can get a little sketchy. This image here was our team when we hosted the ASCE, American Society of Civil Engineers, the student competition. We invited teams and colleges from around California to come and join us to create concrete canoes, and as you can see, race them. We actually did race ours, and we did not do well, but we were the hosts, so we got to have a good time anyway. Um, One thing I can say is scholarships and financial aid are your friends. University of the Pacific, like I said, private schools, so that was pretty pricey. So working through that, I did a lot of essays, a lot of scholarship applications, whatever help I could get. While I was there, I did have a few student loans, but during the concrete canoe construction, we actually designed and built our own canoes. And these were four of my best friends through college. Over there on the far left, Dan Jabor, who is now an associate engineer for dams, levees, and civil works. Um, uh, Assistant business class lead, he works for HGR. The gentleman glaring at the camera in the flannel shirt is Paul Schneider. He is now the president and managing principal engineer for Siegfried Engineering in Stockton. The guy in the hat on the top right corner, that is Ryan Booley. He's a principal engineer with Orange County Water. And in the lower right corner is Steve Pimentel. He's a Cabrillo alumni and he works for the County of Sacramento in their storm and sewer services division. So UOP did well by us. I got to say that Dan and Steve were both Cabrillo alumni, and the three of us pretty much tortured every teacher we had. We took a lot of classes together, so apologies to all of those professors at this point. Internships, one thing that I really liked about UOP and what drew me there, besides the fact that they accepted me, was that it was from start to finish, it was considered a 5 year college, a 5 year program. So from freshman year to senior year, plus a year of internships. So during that time, since I had transferred in, I started out, I was right at the level where I was ready to do those internships. So my first internship was with Mobil Oil down in Torrance, California. I worked as in their remediation engineering department. There were a lot of problems at that time with gas station tank leaking, and a lot of monitoring wells. So we would drill wells, and we actually hired consultants to come out and perform the monitoring, maintain the wells, and we would receive the reports and decide how to proceed with the actual cleanup. So that was my big foray into environmental engineering. Fabulous stuff. Lots of interesting aspects to it and lots of different ways you can go. Now that I'm in construction, I see a whole different side of the environmental issue. My next internship was with Granite Construction, also in Stockton. It meant I could stay and take college courses during the semester. I could work part-time. While I was with Granite, that was the first time around. I'm back again. But I was a takeoff engineer and a bid runner. So a takeoff engineer will take the plans, determine quantities, lengths, areas, volumes of earthwork, primarily for a heavy civil company. Those were the focuses I had. What was the square footage of asphalt paving? How many tons of asphalt materials were going to be needed? So I had a lot of calculations. I had a lot of digitizing of the plans. Bid running, I will say, was interesting. If you've got a few hours, I have some really fun stories about running bids. The idea is you're not supposed to run. You're supposed to take the hard documents, our proposals, and you're supposed to turn them in by a given time as designated by the agency letting the contract. But when you are on the phone, in a car, in a parking garage, with an estimator who's trying to make sure they're getting every last detail correct, sometimes they keep you on the phone a little too long and you do end up having to run into the building to get that proposal in by the skin of your teeth. So that was pretty interesting. During that time, after my internship ended, I went to another construction company, another heavy civil company in Sacramento, excuse me, in Stockton. They had offices throughout the Central Valley of California. Again, I continued with takeoff and bid running. This wasn't so much an internship as part-time employment, but it did get my foot in the door so that when it came time to graduate, I had a resume, I had experience in the industry I had chosen, and I decided that's where I wanted to go. I wanted to be in construction. Design was not going to be a good fit for me. It is for some people. And then the other thing you can see kind of from these internships is that my resume stemmed off of very large companies. I prefer to have a legal department that has my back and can help me interpret contracts and has that specialty. I don't have to be a specialist in it. I just have to understand some basic pieces, but I have people I can reference if necessary. Labor relations, equipment departments, materials divisions. There's a lot of support there in companies the size of Mobile and Granite. So that was a selling point for me. That was interesting to me. After college, I graduated and I went to Tykert Construction. I was there for 11 years. Right about that time, that 11-year mark, the economy tanked, and just about everybody in the industry was laying people off. So I had a 6-month forced vacation where I got to reevaluate what did I want to do, where did I want to go. Um, it hurt, it stung, you know. But while I was with Tykert, I developed and grew a lot. I ended up, this image is one of the last projects that I worked on while I was there. This is the SMUD headquarters in Sacramento. Interestingly enough, just on the north side of Kiefer Boulevard, there is an aggregate pit for granite construction. So Tykert was working right next door to Granite at the time. This project took on some very unique environmental aspects. It was a reclaimed mine, a reclaimed pit, I should say. And so there was a large amount of fill material that had to go back in to bring it back up to grade. The interesting thing about this is because SMUD is an energy company, they're equivalent to PG&E down here, but they're Sacramento Municipal Utilities District. Um, but their goal was to reduce their carbon footprint with this facility. So you can see a lot of the solar panels that went in around the parking lots. The buildings were cooled with 30-foot deep manholes. And they would pull the air out of these manholes because it would get so cold 30 feet down in the ground that they could pull that cold air out and use it to help cool the facilities. So the buildings are cooled by geothermal heat or cooling. The other thing they did was they ran a tremendous amount of polyethylene, I think it was polyethylene pipe, small diameter, but they zigzagged it all underneath that entire southern half of the site. And that was what was pulling the air, cooling the air and pulling it in. So they were able to reverse that in order to heat the facilities. It was kind of interesting. 70-acre site. You can see the red line at the top for Kiefer Boulevard, and then down the left-hand side, the west side of it, is Bradshaw Road. There were 2 miles of 54 to 60-inch reinforced concrete pipe that we had to install down those streets. It was quite interesting. It was definitely a challenge. These are heavily, well, Kiefer not so much, but Bradshaw is a main thoroughfare for morning commutes. So there were limited work hours. There were a lot of challenges to that. The other thing that I learned a lot about was negotiations and pricing of facilities and working with the owners in order to meet their deadlines and give them what they needed in order to make the jobs run smoothly. So the other item I have listed there under my resume for Tykert was the Elk Grove Promenade. I did not bid the job itself, but I was assigned to it as a cost engineer, as a cost estimator later on because there were so many changes that took place. Um, I was able to price out, and this back in the day, this was substantial. It's kind of changed a little bit. But back in the day, I priced out over $2 million in change orders, negotiated them successfully, and we went on to make over 30% on those $2 million worth of change orders. It was very, very profitable for us. Very good work. And it really was a lot of people skills. So you go into engineering thinking I'm math and science and technology, and there really is a lot of people involved. So that's something that we kind of watch out for, interestingly enough. Now I am back at Granite. So after that short little 6 month, what am I going to do with my life? Now I have come back and rejoined the Granite team. I absolutely love what I do. So I say then because my career has taken a few different paths just in my time at Granite. I started out as an estimator, so I would only price out the work, turn in the proposals, budget the money, and go from there. I didn't have to run any work. I didn't have to interact with any project managers. I could bid the job, get the job, and hand it off to somebody else to do the rest of the work. Excuse me. Then they moved me to a project manager, and this is the last job that I ran was a Verizon data center in Rockland, California. This was quite the challenge. To the right-hand side, you can see where the cul-de-sac is, and you can see to the right of that parking stall there. We had about 50 feet wide. There were about 4 or 5 different office trailers parked in that green spot over there. And there was literally an army of people swarming over this site every single day. As soon as we got a building pad in place for the contractors to come and build, we were inundated. It is really hard to get huge pieces of equipment in and around this building when you have constant flow of pedestrian traffic, workers coming and going, parking off to the right there. There was some open ground there. One interesting thing is the elevation difference between at that red line between the ground surface we were working on and the adjacent property was about 25 feet. So we had to build a giant retaining wall, install drainage behind it, and do a whole lot of work there. So that was an interesting design. One thing that I asked when I interviewed to come back to Granite, during my interview process, I asked the human resources manager, the chief estimator, there were 2 chief estimators in the room with me, and the area manager. I said, what defines your people? What motivates them? What is your theme? Excuse me. And they talked about, well, we had a chili cook-off, and we've got a lot of golfers, and what builds your team, what binds them together. I worked for a very small company for a very short period of time, and their theme was bocce ball. So they would go and have a couple cocktails after work and play bocce, and then they'd go home. But it was their method of team building. So I took on the chili cook-off. I have a lot of experience as a barbecue caterer, so I can make a pretty mean pot of chili. I never did win hottest. I was too scared to go that far, but there were some that would try. But several times I did win chili cook-off winner. One year we didn't have enough entries, so I ran down to the store, excuse me, and bought 2 giant cans of Hormel and dumped that in a crock pot, and we labeled it anonymous, and it won. So creativity, that was a workaround. I was also the Friday lunch specialist. We had a courtyard in the building and a barbecue. And after we started doing this on a regular basis, the office managers and leadership went out and bought us a bigger, better barbecue because about once a month we would go down to the carniceria and we would buy a lot of meat, tortillas, cilantro, onions, and we would basically have our own little taco truck there in the courtyard, and it was fantastic. Everybody loved it. Everybody came out, and it was a unique team building experience that we had. So I became the Friday lunch specialist. Great way to blow off a day, great way to end a week, or a stressful period of, we had a whole bunch of estimates going all at once. We would schedule a Friday lunch and just let everybody kind of relax a little bit. So part of that work-life balance, being able to make sure that you're enjoying your home life, but you do need to enjoy your work life as well. Today, I am more of a software specialist. My official title is Project Controls Specialist. Mostly I deal with the field systems. This screenshot is a product called HCSS Heavy Bid, and this is what we use at Granite to generate our proposals. to build out our estimates. What scope of work is needed? How much is it going to cost? What resources do we have? I also work a lot with our field system, Heavy Job, also by HCSS. We have recently started using Autodesk Construction Cloud, excuse me, which is a file storage system and a document controls platform. We have migrated from a standalone shared server to a SharePoint location. So that has meant that for my region, which is the coastal region, we I've created websites and document storage and internal communications tools, news blurbs, what's coming up, photos to be shared, how-to manuals, guidance documents. I'm a huge fan of process improvements. How can we make this better? I like to joke that necessity is not the mother of invention, laziness is. You get better at something because you're tired of doing it the hard way, right? So that's why process improvement is important to me. Mostly the teams that I work with now, instead of my clients and other estimators and project managers when I was an estimator, now my main focus is our field staff, our foremen, our craft employees, our project engineers who are coming into the industry. Way back when I was new to the industry, we were doing paper time cards. Sorry, that's really easy to manage. Look at it. Is it on your desk in time? You don't have to worry about getting lost in the Ethernet, interwebs, whatever. But now, engineers, all I had to focus on was learning the industry, how to build work, how to manage work. Now, with all of these products, our engineers, our foremen are expected to have so much technical knowledge, but things go wrong. Stuff happens, things break, updates don't take, whatever that is. So I find I'm doing a lot of that kind of support. Hang on one second. Okay. So a lot of support. Trying to get somebody who is not familiar with iPads to take a screenshot and send it to you, or to call in using a communication tool like Zoom or Microsoft Teams and have them share their screen with you. It's a little bit of a challenge. I absolutely love it. It means I get to spend time with the foreman out in the field. I get to spend with our engineers who are going to be our next generation of project managers, our next generation of estimators and leaders at this company. And I'm really, really happy to see who's coming up, how well they're catching on and what they're doing. Almost last but not least, not advancing. Okay. Hobbies. I am a serial hobbyist. I get bored and frustrated if I'm not good enough, fast enough. But so some of my longer term endeavors have been there in the purple dress, ballroom dancing. That was at a dance competition in Hawaii. Had an absolute blast doing that. That is more makeup than I have ever owned in my entire life, but I had a blast. Up in the upper right-hand corner, thank you Silicon Valley Designs for the photo. That's me out in front in the speckled pants and the black jersey. Fortunately, I'm not the one on the ground, but it was my job to block those other ladies in the white and stop them from, well, actually running into the person with the star on her helmet who is on the ground to my left. Um, that was a lot of fun. My younger sister did derby for a very long time. I thought, oh heck, I can do that. No, no. Listen to your body when it tells you how old you are. There's something to be said for acknowledging that. And last, in the lower right-hand corner, that was the grand entry held in Winnemucca, Nevada. I ran and produced a rodeo for 12 years. Um, It was a nightmare. I don't ever want to do it again, but it gave me tremendous organizational skills. It gave me the ability to work under pressure, not to say I didn't completely lose my mind at times and vent my frustrations very, very forcefully. But um, this event was, we had over what did we have? We had 44-person rodeo teams. We had a women's division where we would have up to about 20 women's teams, 4 people each. We had steer stoppers, ranch bronc riding. You could see the grand entry. We had contestants from, I think the furthest away we ended up having for one year was Alberta, Canada. So we were an international association. It was kind of impressive, but it gave me a lot of skills of how to manage those kinds of issues. Um, think quick, act quick, keep the process rolling. And that's really what all three of those hobbies kind of have in common. If you slip a little bit during a dance, you have to recover, you have to get back in it. Rodeo, you have to keep the production going. Something happens, you still have to maintain that level. Um, Derby, it's all about getting knocked down and getting back up again. So I guess there is a little bit of a theme to the kind of hobbies I like, but I like the challenge. I like the experience that I've gotten from all of those. And to leave you with some words of wisdom, um, when I worked for Tiker, we would go on these annual retreats. And one of these retreats was up in South Lake Tahoe, and they brought in a company called Eagles Flight. And what they do is a lot of team building activities. And one of the activities they had was called, I can't remember the name, but you had to work in your tables to navigate across this game board and collect resources, expend them appropriately, strategy, risk, um, collaboration was a big part of it. But one of the biggest lessons I took away from that was ask the old man. They had one of our employees who was kind of floating around the room, and he was designated as quote unquote the old man. Now, the thing was, we didn't realize that you can ask the guy who had already gone there and back. That was his backstory. He had already completed the game. We could have asked him anything. Hey, what's the shortcut? Doesn't mean he knew to tell us, but we could have asked him. And there were teams who took advantage of that and asked the old man what he thought, how to get through there. And that has stuck with me for pretty near 20 years. Ask the old man. College education is phenomenal, but I have been truly lucky to have worked with some guys, some people who had 20 to 30 years more experience than me at the time. And they were the ones out there digging the trenches, sitting in the backhoe, managing the concrete pours. So if I didn't understand something, I would go to them and ask. I didn't come out of college saying, I have a degree, I know more than you. It was a collaborative effort. And that's what we were looking for. That's what made that relationship and those friendships so successful, was they respected me because I didn't come out and act like I knew more than they did. And I respected them for the knowledge that they had, that they learned through on the job training, through trial and error, through getting yelled at by their supervisors. Fortunately, I haven't had to go through that. I'd rather they do it, learn the lesson, and share it with me. So, my words of wisdom are ask the old man, share the knowledge, and uh, one of the most successful relationships I had in this industry was a senior estimator that I was paired with when I first started estimating. I knew how to use Excel, I knew how to use technology, and he knew how to read the plans to break down the water line system of an apartment complex into its individual components, uh, bends, elbows, bolts, gaskets, all of those teeny tiny little pieces. So we would work together. I would use the technology, he would use his knowledge. We would produce a water takeoff. We could then get quotes figure out exactly what parts and pieces we need. He learned how to use Excel during that time. He'd watch what I was doing, and I would pay attention to what he was doing, and we trained each other. So don't be afraid. Ask the old man. Share the information. Thank you.